Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, folks, welcome back to the Investigative Journal, and we are not gender neutral on this show. You must first declare before listening whether you are a man or a woman or boy or a girl, and stand by it the rest of your life. No changing. Come on, no changing. Okay, you're listening to Greg Anthony and FirstAmendmentRadio.com. This is the Investigative Journal, a long-running show regarding the Vatican-led New World Order. And today we're going to say one very simple conclusion. America will soon lose its Constitution. Totally. Not that we have much of it left anyway. As George Bush once said, Jr., it's just like a piece of toilet paper. Did he say that? I think he did somewhere. But if he didn't, I'm sure he thought about it when he went to the bathroom every day in the White House. And so do the rest of these selected presidents. Before I get into this, let me ask you a couple questions. If you don't think you're being played here, the Hegelian dialectic at its best, with the latest, for 2 years we've heard nothing but Russia, 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 and Trump, although there's been no evidence that he ever colluded with Russia. But it's just a ploy. It's just a diversion. Now, think about it. The media is controlled by the power elite, the progressives, the globalists, so to speak, the Vatican-led New World Order, and everything they do is geared towards getting to that goal. And so when Obama was selected for president, he gave $150 billion to Iran in cash, and did many other things in Syria, Benghazi. And did they ever say that he was a Iranian spy, or did the FBI investigate him? But they recently investigated Trump as a Russian spy. Now, I'm not saying Trump is on the good side here. He's been selected as well and playing a good part as President of the United States, make America great again. But what's happening here is it's the people that support Trump that are being targeted. They're saying, wow, look at this double standard. Hillary Clinton can, she can acid wipe her server. She was using a private server with government secrets on it that were obviously stole by China and others. She got rid of 33,000 emails, not to mention what she did in Benghazi. And there was not one charge brought. And all the people that protected her, not one charge brought. Then, of course, the FBI has been found to illegally work to get a dossier that was false regarding Trump and used tactics to get a FISA court warrant. And that basically was against the law. Nothing was done. And so all the people, it seems, on that side of the fence never get prosecuted or accused of anything. But anybody in government that supports the American people is getting lambasted by the press, getting accused by special prosecutors of wrongdoing, some of them going to jail for basically things they did in their private life that were minor. And American people are going, what is going on here? How come the globalists get away with everything and we get targeted? That's because in the end, it's going to be a one world order, one world government, and they will succeed. And what they're really doing is saying, look, we control you. There's nothing you can do about it. There's a double standard, you see, and that's the way it's always going to be. And soon, we're going to have to face our most deadly enemy. Now, if you believe in Bible prophecy, it also shows the United States will shortly repudiate every principle of its Constitution, get rid of it totally, and will become one of history's worst powers, persecuting powers. And if you go back, you can go back to Waco and all the other massacres and government-sponsored slaughterings of helpless, defenseless women and children. And you can see what's happening here. When the New World Order is instituted, as told by George Bush, remember when he, in September 11th, 1991, made that speech, which I played, I think I played it for you last week? Freedom will be gone from this earth. There will be no United States to escape to for all of you people coming into the country now illegally. It won't matter. There'll be no Constitution, no Bill of Rights, no guarantees of freedom of any kind. And the whole world will be just one big prison. As Alex Jones, one of their Jesuit temporal coadjutors, as Eric Phelps would say, has told you on his website called Prison Planet. He works for them, though, folks. He's one of those people put in there to control the opposition so that you don't get the truth about the Vatican-led New World Order. Now, the freedom we have enjoyed, whatever that's left of it, and basically, many will say was our founding fathers brought this freedom here, and now it's going to be thrown away by unscrupulous politicians. But I say that it's always been a goal, and many of our founding fathers realized why this country was being formed for this very exact reason that we talk about today. And many of the founding fathers never take credit for it, one being Lorenzo Ricci, the Jesuit general during that time. And go to my shows, just Google some of my interviews and also my shows regarding that portion of our history and the Jesuits and the founding of America and the Revolutionary War. It's quite interesting. Now, some of these things I'm going to read were written shortly after 1993, February 28th, when Waco occurred. We forget about that. There's been so many in the meantime. We even forget about Waco, don't we? And you'd have to be really blind not to see what's occurring. This article that I'm going to read to you, written back then, will explain how and why we're losing our Constitution. And it's pretty good, really. So let me just go through it a little bit. The United States can never be taken. It doesn't say who wrote this, but I'll give you the website. It's, let me see. It doesn't even do that. Passionist.com. Okay? And the United States, many of these things we've talked about over the years on my show, so I thought I'd just put it together here. And the United States can never be taken by an external enemy. U.S. military might is way too strong for any nation to ever hope, in a sense, to defeat the U.S. militarily. Now, some may argue with that now and say China could do that. The U.S. must be infiltrated, though, and taken from within. Don't you think so? Yeah. Now, here's a quote by Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States. For those of you who don't read American history anymore, there's a lot behind Abraham Lincoln that's never talked about that you can get in a book called 50 Years in the Church of Rome by Charles Chiniquy. He was a priest who exposed the inner goals of the papacy and their real goals regarding America. Now, Lincoln said, "At what point shall we expect the approach of danger? By what means shall we fortify against it? Shall we expect some transatlantic military giant to step the ocean and crush us at a blow? Never. All the armies of Asia, Europe, Africa combined, with all the treasure of the earth in their military chest, with a Bonaparte for a commander, could not by force take a drink from the Ohio or make a track on the Blue Ridge in a trial of 1,000 years. At what point, then, is the approach of danger to be expected? I answer it this way. If it ever reach us, it must spring from among us. It cannot come from abroad. If destruction be our lot, we must ourselves be its author and finisher. As a nation of free men, we must live through all time or die by suicide. Now, he made this address on January 27th in Springfield, Illinois, 1838. Now, I remember Chiniquy that I just mentioned. Go get that book and read. We talked many times about the story of Abraham Lincoln prior to him being president, and his connection to Charles Chiniquy. Now, for so many decades, folks, the papacy has been laying decades, hundreds of years, laying plans for the takeover of the United States. First of all, folks, they started by making sure that the Constitution of the United States allowed freedom of religion so they could get in here and grow to the monster it is today. Because they weren't welcome in the New World because of their actions in Europe, correct? Especially the Jesuits. But this is, you don't get this in history. None of these kids, these millennials, globalists, ever get this. And I said yesterday on my show, I wanted to bring it forward so you could hail to your heroes. You could applaud your Jesuit heroes for doing what they're doing now, since you love globalism so much, and you love the New Age movement, which they founded, and you love all of the drugs that come into the country, which they make sure happens, and they get a piece of it, a piece of the money, I say. So I want you to be, aware of who your heroes are, and to applaud them, because they are so humble. They never want to take credit for what they're doing. Now, this goal of the papacy is clearly stated in this book by someone who knew what they were doing during the 1800s here. Now, Chiniquy said this in his book, page 373. We are determined to take possession of the United States and rule them, this being the papacy. But we cannot do that without acting secretly and with the utmost wisdom. If our plans become known, they will surely be defeated. Of course. And that's the reason why, folks, today you don't get this information on Prison Planet, on Fox News, on CNN, anywhere. Most of the internet is blind to this, so you will get a few people talking about it. The reason is, if their secrets are known, they can't get away with what they do. So, he went on to say how sad will be their awakening when with our outnumbering votes we will turn them forever from every position of honor, power, and profit. What will those hypocritical and godless sons and daughters of the fanatical Pilgrim Fathers say when not a single judge, not a single teacher, not a single policeman will be elected if he be not devoted to the Roman Catholic Church? What will those so-called giants think of their matches, shrewdness, and ability when not a single senator or member of Congress will be chosen if he not be submitted to our Holy Father, the Pope? What a sad figure those Protestant Yankees will cut when we will not only elect the president, but fill and command the armies, man the navies, and hold the keys of the public treasury. That was said in the 1800s. If you think about it, that's what they've done right now. They select the president, beholden to the Pope. They go kiss his ring. Many of the people that are the head diplomats are trained at Georgetown University. And if you look at the people in the highest positions of government, they're all beholden to the Jesuits and the Pope. They control the money. They control the army, the navy, etc. So that was their goal, and they're seeing it today. But people are blind to this, folks. They're blind to what's happening, and so nobody pays attention. And then what does he say? He says, yes, then they will rule the United States and lay them at the feet of the vicar of Jesus Christ, the Pope, that he may put an end to their godless system of education and sweep away those impious laws of liberty of conscience, which are an insult to God and man. If you read very closely the writings of the Catholic Church, their history with Hitler, Stalin, etc., their government of choice is fascism, and not the Republic of the United States Constitution. They hate it behind the scenes. In public, they say they love it. But in public, they also love, won't tell you here in America, they back all dictators as well. And quote, on page 374, he went on to say, The American people must be very blind indeed if they do not see that if they do nothing to prevent this, the day is very near when the Jesuits will rule their country from the magnificent White House at Washington to the humblest civil and military department of this vast republic. And folks, I say without a doubt, we're pretty close to that coming true today, if not true as we sit here today and talk, when you start looking at all their connections. And a lot of people on the internet go to great lengths to check out everybody's history, what school they went to, and it's amazing how many are Jesuit trained. But when people that don't understand the story hear that, they go, well, that's good. They have great universities, don't they? They're the great educators. So it's a difficult task. You got to do your homework to understand what we're talking about here and the seriousness behind it. The papacy is, folks, the most deadly enemy of the United States that you'll ever face, and no one knows that. They use the utmost secrecy over the hundreds of years to conceal the plans. The papacy, through her facade of religion, her facade of a religion, has for many decades and hundreds of years infiltrating the United States in all levels of government. Hell with government, with Russian infiltration and all of that. We're being taken over from within. As a result, the United States will lose its constitution totally and become a tyrannical, persecuting power. Now, when you read the following, their goal is to basically simple. When you read anything, it's to take over the states, United States, trash the Constitution. The American Constitution is thoroughly, totally hated by the papacy behind the scenes because the freedom safeguards it contains make it impossible for them to take it over as long as the Constitution is in force and as long as there are people to enforce it. That's the problem. Now, more said in this book, which I wanted to read. I very seldom have done this. I've done many stories about Chiniquy, and I just wanted to pull a few quotes from his book because it's pretty good. Rome, he said, is a constant conspiracy against the rights and liberties of man all over the world, but particularly in the United States. And long before he was ordained a priest, he knew that the church was the most implacable enemy of this republic. His professors of philosophy, history, and theology, this is Mr. Chiniquy, had been unanimous in telling me that the principles and laws of the Church of Rome were absolutely antagonistic to the laws and principles that are the foundation stones of the Constitution of the United States. First, the most sacred principle of the U.S. Constitution is the equality of every citizen before the law. But the fundamental principle of the Church of Rome is the denial of that equality. And how can we say, we can probably give you example throughout this vast country of ours, but let's use two huge political opponents and the examples here. If you don't think there's a double standard and an inequality of the way the laws are administered, and the Jesuits are doing this to shove it in the face of Americans who still believe in the United States Constitution. As I mentioned many times, if you look at the Clinton cartel, Bill, Hillary, and all of the people on the globalist side that have done things where they should all be in jail. The most recent is the Hillary Clinton email scandal. I'm sure you know about that, and how she hid a private server in her house and put government secrets on it, which is basically a felony. She should be in jail. She, acid washed her computer. She also broke her phone with a hammer. She did not, she destroyed 33,000 emails. Isn't it interesting how they go 33,000, 33? Why isn't that 34? That's a little sign between the, powers of be on both the Republican and Democratic side that, she's protected. Nothing happens to her. Nothing happened to Obama when he gave Iran $150 billion. And nothing happened when they were involved in Benghazi, and on and on and on. And then the Americans see how one of their supposed leaders, President Trump, although he's in on it too, but this is directed towards the American people, how they're constantly looking and putting his followers in jail for next to nothing, when the other side is let scot-free, so the Americans see the inequality of justice. Now, second, the liberty of conscience is proclaimed by the United States a most sacred principle, which every citizen must uphold. But liberty of conscience is declared by all the Pope and councils of Rome a most godless, unholy, and diabolical thing, which every good Catholic must abhor and destroy at any cost. Third, the American Constitution assures the absolute independence of the civil from the church power. So basically, there's a separation of church and state, correct? But the Church of Rome declares, through all her pontiffs and councils, that such independence is a revolt against God. The American Constitution leaves every man free to serve the God of his choice according to his dictates and conscience. But the Church of Rome declares that no man has ever had such a right, and that the Pope alone can know and say what man must believe and do. And when the papacy finally takes over, there will be bloodshed. The Church of Rome says that she has a right to punish with the confiscation of their goods, the penalty of death, and those who differ in faith from the Pope. That's still in existence today, folks. So tell me, what is the real enemy that we're talking about here? And why don't we know about it? The real enemies are always the ones you don't know anything about. The hidden enemy. The enemy within that's going to destroy this country. And we're just pointing it out right here. And it's not a coincidence that people that talk this way has their voice silenced. And in America, I thought it was supposed to be a place where all voices and all credible arguments, which this is, when you look at history and pull up all the information, it should be on the table, along with all the other theories regarding what's happening in the United States. But it isn't. And the reason it isn't is because it's the truth. And they have to hide this story because it makes too much sense. It's just common sense when you start looking at it. And too many people would believe it, and there go their plans right down the drain. They can't have it. Simple as that. So what do? They don't allow it in the mainstream. They hire people to control thinking and thought in the alternative media. So basically they take over all truth movements. They don't allow this discussion, because the big discussion on the internet is always, who are these people behind the scenes that are controlling governments of the world? How come this story never gets adequate play? Because they have to keep it secret. Simple as that. And America has no idea of the terrible trouble and persecution that is coming at the hands of the papacy. And mark my words on that. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal. You can also get my show at greganthonysjournal.wordpress.com. Back in 3 minutes on FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
Visit crosstheborder.org, C-R-O-S-S, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn. The Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, C-R-O-S-S, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
Okay, folks, we're back for the second half hour. I want to continue a little bit about the biggest enemy that the American people face and the world faces, and that's the papacy. And then I want to get on and finish what I started regarding one of my favorite topics, and I'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so why do all the presidents of the United States go running to kiss the Pope's ring? Why, in fact, do most of the world leaders do the same? Because the Vatican, the Roman Catholic Church, is not only a satanic force, which in their occult world is very important, the head of the Satanists and Luciferians in the world, right there in Rome. But outside of that, the Vatican is the biggest. The Roman Catholic Church, biggest financial power, biggest wealth accumulator and property owner in the existence of the world. She's the greater possessor of material riches than any other single institution, corporation, bank, giant trust, government, or state of the whole globe. If you want to call it a globe, they do. And today, I'm going to tell you why that's a lie as well. Because we're going to end the show with that subject, which I always like to do because it shows you just how we've been bamboozled. When they can even change your belief system by phony science on the earth that you live on and what it really is. Amazing. But you have to look at this. What that statement I just said, that's why they go kiss his ring. Today, the Pope's Jesuits are not only entrenched at the highest levels in departments of the U.S. government, but they are also in the highest levels of virtually all corporations and industries in the United States. The Jesuits are the major stockholders of many large corporations. They own more than half of the stock in Bank of America, for instance. And because the papacy is a so-called church, they don't pay any taxes either, because they are a so-called church. They are able to operate internationally outside of the laws and legal proceedings everyone else must follow. It's a pretty good gig, isn't it? Here's a few of the Jesuit-controlled corporations, and this is an old list, but just to give you an example. And they totally support Jesuits in Congress and the government. The American Airlines, TWA, Anheuser-Busch, AT&T, Bell Atlantic, Cigna, Coca-Cola, Boeing, Chrysler, Exxon, Ford Motor Company, General Electric, Hewlett-Packard, Home Depot, May Company, Walmart, McDonald's, Motorola, Philip Morris, Price Waterhouse, Rite Aid, NGR Nabisco, Sony, Texaco, United Parcel Service, Walt Disney, and Wells Fargo, and many, many more. These corporations give their Jesuit senators and congressmen in both the Democrat and Republican parties many millions of dollars for their election campaigns. These senators and congressmen are the most radical and dangerous this country has ever had. They do everything they can to pass laws and regulations prohibited by our Constitution, laws designed to destroy the United States, to eliminate freedom, and to convert the United States into a ruthless tyranny, as well as a socialistic, fascistic regime. They lie constantly to deceive people so that people will go along with the laws and regulations they pass. Now, they totally ignore the Constitution when you think about it, and the laws and regulations they pass are designed to export industrial and manufacturing base of the United States to other countries. Now, lately you hear Trump beating the drum about bringing these companies back. Let's see what really happens. They regulate agencies, restrict the private use of land. There's nonsensical environmental rules and regulations, etc., etc. Now, the Jesuits are not recognized at all in the general population because of their secrecy and their treachery that people just can't believe people that wear the cloth, the collar, can do. They tell no one, and I'm talking about people in Congress or even Jesuits, that they are Jesuits. They even belong to other churches, other cultures, other organizations that they have infiltrated to hide their identity and to control these organizations. And there are millions of these Pope Jesuits all over the place. They're everywhere. Someone once criticized me years ago and said, "You find a Jesuit under every rock." And I said, there is. They are into everything. NASA. That's one that we're going to talk about in a minute. They are into every major organization, control nearly every political organization, because the Jesuits' extreme secrecy. Many of these organizations and governments are totally unaware that they are even being infiltrated and controlled. Isn't that amazing? It is easy, if you think about it, to identify these Jesuit puppets and Jesuits in Congress, because they are the ones that are continually trying to get all the kinds of laws passed that require exactly the opposite of what the Constitution really says. They continually pass laws that restrict liberty. They continually pass laws to regulate every aspect of your life. They're continuing today. They continually pass laws that restrict freedom of speech, such as the Campaign Finance Reform Act. Incidentally, they always use names for these laws that will sound good to the American people, but rarely indicate what it is. They use every means they can to deceive the people of the country and world. Look at this. Remember we talked yesterday, the Patriot Act, written of 2001, prior to 9/11, is an almost total violation of the Constitution, requiring many of the regulations Nazi Germany and Communist Russia had. And in the guise of terrorism, we must protect America, right? Why didn't the congressmen and senators have the good sense to vote no? They didn't even read it. because it was written prior to 9/11 at the hand of a lawyer from Georgetown, Jesuit Georgetown, named Vin Dim. How could they write the Patriot Act prior to 9/11 if they didn't know 9/11 was going to occur? How about the Homeland Security Act of 2002? It's another act that was passed to take away freedom in the United States. Same as the Patriot Act. And what about the laws, the gun laws? They're constantly trying to take away the guns from the American people. Many of these false flag things you read about on TV are geared to do that, to get people to turn over their weapons, stating that that's the difference. But in a sense, once you do that, it's pretty simple. It's common sense. If you take away guns from the innocent, only the criminals will have them because they don't care about the laws. They don't care about gun control laws. They'll just buy their weapons on the black market. And there'll be more on the black market the stricter the gun control laws are. So you're disarming a nation, putting it into the hands of criminals for the benefit of the Jesuit, Vatican-led New World Order and its minions to take control over you. When the citizens of a nation are armed, or their right to own guns is not infringed, the crime rate is lower. So don't listen to that nonsense. Now, did you know that every man in Switzerland is required to have guns in his home, including assault rifles? Crime in Switzerland is almost non-existent. In states and cities in America that allow people to carry guns, the crime rate is lower. During World War II, some say Hitler wanted to invade Switzerland. The Swiss told him that he could send his army across the border, but none of his officers would return. Hitler gave the order to invade Switzerland several times, but his officers refused to obey. Switzerland remained safely neutral all during the war. Mainly some say it's because all the money was put there and they didn't want to invade, but others say it was at the hands of Swiss private citizens who had guns. Well, anyway, that's about enough with the Jesuits and the major enemy that America faces. And we'll always come back to that subject. But what I wanted to do today, and I changed my mind in midstream here. I'm not going to play anything on the flat earth today. But I want to go to an interview I did yesterday or the day before. We talked about pedophilia and the child trafficking rings in this country. And years ago in 2009, this is part one of a 5-part interview I did with an investigator named Jim Rothstein. And he's a retired New York detective, and he investigated numerous child sex slave rings, in which many cases led right up to the leading political figures. But always at that point, the investigations were shut down. I wanted to do this the last time I did a pedophilia story, but ran out of time. So let's play this interview I did on June 22nd, 2009 with Jim Rothstein.
My guest is Jim Rothstein. He's a former New York police detective who has worked hard over his life to try to understand what he calls the biggest terrorist problem in our country, and that's the kidnapping of our children. Many of these kids that you see on milk cartons, their pictures on milk cartons, go into these pedophile rings. Jim has documented it, and one of the things he talks about is that none of these investigations in the 30 or 40 years he's been working on this, both publicly and privately, have ever gone to the very top. When you talk about the very top, he means high-level government officials who are protected, as well as high-level Vatican officials who are protected, i.e. a former late Cardinal Spellman, who Jim investigated, who was the head of the Archdiocese in New York. And we talked about that in past shows. But I first wanted to get Jim's comments regarding, I've never asked Jim these questions regarding state agencies like Children and Family Services. We see that a lot of abuse goes on there, Jim. Kids are if they're not being taken off the street by kidnappings like you're talking about, they're being somehow corralled into these agencies, then put into foster cares when you find that there's really no abuse in families. Were you ever working on it, were you ever aware of any problems with children and family services while you were working as a police officer or after?
Yes, we did. Well, during the time I was a police officer, we had a big thing going between Illinois and Texas, and these kids would end up in foster care, and the whole, it was a couple hundred of them, ended up shipped down to Texas to some social services network there, and they were funneled into the pedophile world. We also had at another instance where in Minnesota, they had one where when the kids that were in foster care and stuff ended up in these homes, they had one in a place called Sauk Center, a girls' home, and we actually had that they were selling the kids to the pimps to be brought into prostitution around the United States, especially New York City. And I have many, many calls where it seems like there's a manual written on how this works. They get into divorce court or somehow get to where they can grab the kids, and then the kids end up into all kinds of different networks. Some of the people are legitimate, but there's a lot of corruption in that, where people have no clue what they're doing, or taking kids and just sending them to homes that are no better, or in most cases worse than where they came from.
Exactly, and what I wanted to emphasize for the next few minutes is this growing problem in all these child services organizations in each state. And what the real problem began when laws were passed that gave financial incentives to states from the feds based on how many children were in their system. So what they started to do when you see this pattern is that they began to just corral as many kids as they can and then trump up abuse charges, fraudulent documents, people lying about what the situation was with the families, just to get kids into their system so that they could keep the system functioning, get more federal money, and then in the case you're talking about, a lot of these kids either end up in abusive foster homes or are funneled into these pedophile rings. Did you ever see, when you were, or since you left the police department, do you see a concerted effort to keep these systems running like this all around the states? And how come people can't stop what's going on with these laws that have been passed that are very wrong?
Well, the people that pass these laws, a lot of them have ulterior motives, and those that don't haven't got a clue what's happening. And people shouldn't allow this. We should stand up for what's right. And you'll find it's awful hard for people to stand up. Many times they are threatened and, that they're going to go to jail for not taking care of their kids and that. But the most important thing to look here is follow the money. Where is the money going? It just goes on and on. The more money they make, the more they got, and they don't really care what happens to the kids in many cases.
Right. And, I just see stories of abuse all over the country in these systems, people talking on my show regarding how kids were taken away for a simple dog bite, how kids were taken away because one parent argued with another child. In the case of certain ministries, like the Alamo ministry, they just raided the place, and now over 35 children are still in custody for the last 8 or 9 months without really solid evidence of abuse. And these state agencies can just walk in, basically, and take these kids. Now, where they end up is another story. Some I've documented have been abused in these foster homes, some even killed, and others somehow are missing and not on the state rolls. In Florida, it was documented by a group there that thousands of children have not been accounted for over the years. They don't know where they're at.
Well, that's
so
why
I assume they end up in the pedophile rings that you investigate.
Yes, a lot of them do, and I think it would be nice if somebody had the courage to inventory this and do an accounting of each and every child that's ever been in the system and see where they are. I think you'd have one of the biggest scandals in this world. Years ago, they'd just throw them in a foster home of some kind under the guise of an orphanage, and if they were lucky, they survived. And some of probably the worst people I dealt with were victims, and then themselves became the pedophiles and stuff that worked on it, that came out of these. And now you've got these kids thrown out, seized by people who have no clue what they're doing, overzealous people who shouldn't even be in the business, and they take these kids, and these kids disappear. Who's watching over that? Nobody. And if you bring it up, you're a bad person.
Yeah, exactly. Now, you've called the biggest terrorist threat in this country not what went on after 9/11, but the kidnapping of our children into these pedophile rings. You've dedicated your life to this. As a police officer, you first started out in Vice in New York, and then you worked your way up as a detective. Then you got on the State Crime Task Force to try to eliminate this problem. But tell us why you consider this to be the biggest terrorist threat in our country, even to this day.
Well, that's not hard to figure out. You know, you've got these kids disappearing and dying. It covers quite a different variety of things. And you never, you hear this thing, they're investigating the local authorities, the federal authorities, and then the classic comment, we can't talk about it, it's an ongoing investigation. And people start believing this. And I think I've said this on every show I've ever done with you. The only mother I know that's ever stood up and fought up to the end was Noreen Gosh. She just didn't believe that. She wanted to see what was being done, and when she saw nothing was being done, she understood how the system worked. And it's a classic case. I always refer to her case because of how it worked. And this goes on more and more every day. And any police officer or federal agent who dares investigate these cases to the fullest extent of the law, his career is over with. And what really amazes me why it's terrorism is that people are scared to go ahead and want to know what happened to their kid all across this country. And it's growing and growing and growing, and nothing is being done. Although I've seen lately, for instance, they're doing this federal investigation into the trucking industry with the disappearance of children. Long overdue. There's a number of other things that I just saw the other day. I have a person who's sending me information where they're having these buddy rides with truck drivers for kids.
Okay, I wanted to break that off with Jim because I only have about 4 minutes. And, of course, over the next few weeks, I'll play some more of our interview with him years ago. That was, 10 years ago? But here's a little clip from Noreen Gosh that I interviewed as well with Jim. And she had her son put into one of these pedophile rings. He was a paper boy in the 80s, about 10, 11, 12 years old, taken into one of these rings. And just listen a few minutes to what she says. Here's Noreen Gosh.
So the police did everything they could to throw obstacles in my path. Then there was a small article in the paper about 2 other girls, aged 13 and 14, that were taken from Des Moines about the second week of September after Johnny's kidnapping. The girls were found over in Omaha. The men fit the same description as the ones that took Johnny. And the girls were found in prostitution that they were put into over there, but they were rescued and brought back to Des Moines. I took that article to the police chief, and I asked him if he would please call Robert Wadman, who was the police chief of Omaha, and ask about it, since Omaha was only 2 hours away, and the men fit the same description. The police chief looked at me and he said, no, he says, I don't have a feel for that. So then I went to the FBI office. No, they wouldn't. I went to the state police called the DCI here. They wouldn't either. So then I called the press and I did a press conference. And I wanted to ask the public for their help and demand to know why none of these agencies would at least make a phone call to Omaha to check on the facts in that case to see what else might match our case. Within an hour after I did that press conference, I received a phone call. It was a man with a raspy voice, and he said, if you don't quit rocking the boat, you're going to die. And that was my first death threat. So I sat there and I thought, okay, what boat did I rock? The only one I could think of is that I pointed the finger towards Omaha, Nebraska, way back in the day before the Franklin scandal broke. And they were terrified that I might actually find something. And they had to try to stop me in some way, so then the death threats and other harassment began. At that point, the police chief made a press release to the Des Moines Register saying that the Goshes were nothing but damn stupid people. And that it was none of our concern to be investigating this case. And he actually swayed public opinion against us. And it became very difficult here because as rumor mills began, if you've got the police saying, don't help the family, nobody's going to help the family.
Okay, so there you go. And you can get much more if you Google Noreen Gosh and Greg Anthony's interviews, Greg Szymanski's interviews with her. And you can see what happened. Here's a woman who had her son put in a pedophile ring. There's much more to this story. And when she was trying to get some, close to it, she was marginalized and death threats were geared towards her. So basically, the words of Jim Rothstein ring true when he says, any time that you get to the top levels of these pedophile rings in government and the Vatican, always the investigations are stopped. Back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.